Hey guys, I had a few minutes, so I thought I would do another quick video for you. Today I'm going to be focusing on a slightly different area. I've been talking a lot about anxiety. Today I'm going to sort of transition slightly into stress. There is a relationship between the two. They are closely related, and a lot of people sort of describe a situation like, I'm really stressed about this, I'm really anxious about that. They kind of mean the same thing and they use those two words, but there is actually a difference between the two. So stress is generally a reaction that is happening to something that's going on now around you or in your environment, like you're stressed because of what's going on at work or what's happening in that relationship. Whereas anxiety is generally a fear or a worry about what might happen. And whereas anxiety is an ongoing problem a lot of the time for someone, especially if they suffer with long-term anxiety, stress can be actually quite short. And the reason for that is when the circumstances outside of you change that have been triggering the stress response, then the symptoms will go away. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Now, what I want you kind of to get the idea of now is that stress accumulates throughout the day. We are stressed in one way or another about 70% of the time. Now, you might think that that's actually really quite high. I suppose on some level it is, but not all stress is bad for us. We need a certain amount of stress to get us out of bed and everything else and get us moving, hit deadlines, keep us focused, if you like. But I want you to get the idea that stress accumulates in the body, and think about it almost like, and you probably heard this, a stress bucket. The idea that in your mind you have a bucket that fills up as the stress increases in your life throughout the day. Now, if you are someone that has a particularly stressful job or relationship, or you're someone that is just an anxious person or a stress, worry kind of sort of person, you can imagine that that bucket is filling up most of the time. Now, we're all kind of sitting with different levels in our buckets, and the closer that you get towards the top of that bucket, the easier it will be to push you over the edge. So, in other words, someone that is highly stressed most of the time is going to become overwhelmed a lot quicker than someone that doesn't get stressed very often. So start getting, I guess, present to the idea that there is a level of stress that is healthy, and then stress fills up to the point where we're very quick to become overwhelmed. And it's about managing the level of your bucket to enable you to cope better with the stressful things that are going on in and around in your life. So stress, it affects all areas of your life, but one of the key areas that you may not realize is actually helped. The one way we deal with sort of stress, if you like, is when we go to sleep. The idea that sleep has cycles, and within those cycles there is something called a REM or REM cycle, rapid eye movement, or as you know it, dreaming. And then there's deep sleep, and then it goes round and round and round. So you do that about 3 or 4 times, you have those cycles in your sleep. Now what's happening with deep sleep is that's healing the body, and when you're doing your REM sleep, that is actually emptying the stress bucket that I've been talking about. So one of the first things to be affected by stress is your sleep patterns. So just something to be aware of. Now, the other things that stress will affect are when you have the stress response in your body is getting ready to deal with those stressful situations or the danger that's coming at you. And so it puts all of your resources into the parts of your body that you'll need, like your legs and your arms. So it'll pump the blood into those areas, and it will shut down systems that you don't need. So for example, your immune system will be shut down temporarily, your digestive system will be shut down, and your reproductive system will be shut down. Now, if you're someone that is experiencing the stress response or you're anxious most of the time, then you can imagine that it's going to start to play havoc with your sort of body clock, because we're not meant to be in that stress response for long periods of time. So it's not unusual for someone that's stressed a lot to have their immune system compromised and get sick all the time. It's not unusual if you're someone that's very stressed that you don't fancy eating a lot of the time. And when someone is stressed, women struggle to conceive and men will struggle to perform. I think you know what I'm talking about there. I'm gonna leave that there. So I think I'm gonna give you some tips that are gonna help you to empty your bucket, because the idea that the more you keep your bucket under control, the more you will be able to cope with those daily stressful experiences that are happening to you. So here's a really simple thing that you can focus on, and most of us are doing this all the time. We have unresolved little things that niggle away at us. Let's call them energy loops. Okay, energy loops, things like phone calls we haven't made, those bills on those documents that we should be dealing with, or that conversation that you need to have, or some things, all of these things, these balls, if you like, that you're juggling, where we are just not dealing with the little things that we need to deal with on a daily basis. And a lot of things that my clients say to me is, it's just too much. It's too much stuff. It's unmanageable. And of course, that adds to your stress bucket. Whenever you kind of think for a moment, what have I got to do? And then you start listing all of these things in your head, you are building up and filling up your bucket with stress. So the idea of breaking it down, you don't need to, this is what coaching is. Essentially, all I do when I'm coaching is I'm getting someone that's freaking out about a very big problem, and I'm getting them to break it down into chunk-sized pieces. That old chestnut of how do you eat an elephant, one piece at a time. Because think about it like this, if you had you just bought like an IKEA flat pack set, and the instructions, instead of having it one page at a time, they just had one page of the finished product and say, there you go, it looks like that, build it. You'd be like, where do I start? That's unmanageable. So what they do is they break it down. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. And that's kind of how you need to start thinking about dealing with your day-to-day stuff. So if someone's let their admin get on top of them, or think there's a whole list of stuff that they're avoiding, the more the list is getting big, the more they just can't deal with it. So break it down. Just say, today I only need to do one thing. And if I do that one thing today, it means that I'm getting on top of it. I start to feel better about myself, and I start to feel better about the workload. And if you did that for 7 days, that would be 7 things off your list done, and it just becomes manageable. Break it down into manageable size chunks. So that would be my first tip to deal with stress. My next tip would be, do some exercise. I cannot emphasize this enough. Preferably some cardio exercise, but anything that gets your heart up to about 3/4 of its capacity. And the reason for that is, first of all, it burns stress hormones like cortisol. So you're going to actually be de-stressing yourself while you're working out. But it will also create the kind of hormones and neurotransmitters that you want. Things like dopamine, things like serotonin, things like endorphins. These hormones are going to make you feel better. They're going to de-stress you. They're going to make you feel like you can cope. But the other thing exercise does is it means that you can focus better. You can concentrate. Your memory's sharper. You'll be more productive after you go for a run, which is why now in some companies people have meetings walking around rather than sitting in a boardroom, because it actually makes their mind work better. It will also help to grow new brain cells, various other things. But I cannot stress enough, if you are a stressed out person, double stress there, then you should start doing some exercise of some kind. It will help with depression, it will help with stress, it will help with anxiety, and it will make you better at what you do and get more done. Meditation. Meditation is really important. If you are not avoiding it because you think it's some kind of woo-woo kind of spiritual thing that only very strange people or spiritual people do, then that's not true. Meditation is nothing. If you strip it down to its absolute core, it's just a focused state of awareness. And when there's lots of different kinds of meditation. Your meditation might just be going for a walk in the country. Your meditation might be doing some yoga or some sort of exercise. It's basically something that keeps you present. But for deeper kinds of meditation, what that is actually doing is it is another way of emptying your bucket, stress bucket, while you're awake, because your stress bucket will be emptying when you're asleep. But if you're only relying on your sleep in order to empty that stress bucket, and your sleep is all over the place, because the more stressed you are, the more your brain has to work during your REM cycle to empty that bucket. And it can only do that about 20, our sleep is restricted, or REM pattern is restricted to about 20% of our sleep patterns. And if we try and overdo that, one of two things is going to happen. Either your mind will wake you up because it can't cope with emptying that much bucket, and it wants to stop you from burning out, literally burning out in your mind, or you will sleep, but the quality of your sleep will be massively compromised. So actually, a lot of the time, you will wake up and you will feel exhausted because again, your mind has been trying to empty that bucket frantically all night, and therefore it takes a lot of energy, and when you wake up you feel exhausted. So actually it doesn't feel like you've had any sleep, which will make you feel even more depressed. So it's a vicious cycle. So doing something like meditation and exercise during the day means that you're helping your body to release that stress. So we have 3 different states. We have our drive state, our stress state, and our recovery state. And most people are like revolving between drive and stress, but not many people are doing enough of the recoveries. So it's really important to start introducing some things like meditation, exercise, and making sure that your sleep, it will help you with your sleep, because if you're not relying fully on your sleep to empty that bucket, then you've got more chance of getting balanced up, and then your sleep will improve, which means your bucket will become under control quicker and you will start to feel better. I could stop there, but there's one more thing that I think will help, because I think a lot of people do that or do this, and that is that they worry about things that are outside of their sphere of control or their circle of influence. So there's really this idea, I talked about it in the last video, this idea of we feel afraid when we feel like we might be out of control, so we do what we do to get control back or get a sense of control back. But the reality is there's very little that we've got actual control over. Control is actually an illusion, especially anything outside. There's only really 2 things that you've got any kind of control over, and that is the kind of thoughts that you're thinking and the decisions that you're then making. Those are the only 2 things you've really got control over. And I think a lot of people waste a lot of time and energy thinking and worrying about things that they don't have control over. And I guess the biggest culprit of this, or the biggest way that people do that, is they worry about what other people are thinking about them. And when you really think about that, first of all, you don't know, like the majority of the time, what you're worrying about person is thinking about you is assumption. You have no idea if that's the case, and you might get yourself really worked up believing that that's true. And here's the other thing, when you actually do get to speak to that person or you have an interaction with that person, because you believe that your assumption is true, you will start to behave in a way that makes that person feel uncomfortable. And therefore they will start treating you in a weird way, and you'll be going, oh, I knew it was true. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So stop assuming things. But the other thing I would say about that is what someone else is thinking about you is none of your business. Really get what I mean by that for a second. Does what someone else thinking about you change anything about who you are? How good you are at your job? You know, what you've been through? It doesn't change anything. It's literally a waste of time and energy, and you're just gonna get yourself all worked up and you're just piling more stuff into the bucket. Because what that is every negative thought that you have is converted into anxiety and stress, and it all ends up in that bucket. So be mindful about what you're thinking about. And if you're trying to control things that are very much out of your control, it's usually just going to get you worked up, and it's a waste of time. Just like watching the news, for example, and those things are very much out of your control. You can only do what you can do within your sphere of influence, and that might be, you know, doing something to make you feel better in terms of like recycling if you're worried about pollution in the world or whatever it is. You do what you can within your sphere of influence, but getting all worked up and freaking out and about something that you have absolutely no control over is just filling up the bucket. So be mindful of your bucket, what you're filling it up with, and just start to introduce some relaxation and recovery time and some of these other things that I've suggested, because when you have your stress levels at an amount that's copable for you, you're going to have a lot more capacity and you're going to have a much better quality of life. You'll find suddenly you have a lot more time on your hands, and that you have your energy levels go up, and you're going to feel better, basically. So I hope that's been helpful. Have a great weekend, and I will record another video soon. Take care.